Thank you very much, Speaker, and I am very pleased to have the opportunity to speak about Bill 175, the Safer Ontario Act. But before I get to that, I am disheartened that I have the opportunity to speak to this time allocation motion ahead of us. And you know, the ins and outs of the legislature are sort of, inside baseball and hard to explain to the folks out there, and it's worth explaining today because I've never seen anything like this. And I want to read from the time allocation motion that we're debating today. And basically, time allocation is legislature fancy for rush. This is just, the ability to rush this bill through a 191-page bill that I had the distinct privilege of sitting in committee for 6 hours one of the days. And this is a big bill that folks want to talk about. But here we are debating this time allocation motion, which says today on March 5th, remember that, today's March 5th, that the deadline for filing amendments shall be 12:30, just after lunch, on Tuesday, March 6th. So that's tomorrow. So it's about 2:30 now. So by this time tomorrow, you'll already have missed the window to submit your amendments. And then, by the way, the committee shall be authorized to meet on Tuesday, March 6th, that's the same day as tomorrow, from 3:30 p.m. to 11 p.m. for the purpose of clause-by-clause consideration of the bill. So get your amendments in. You have less than a day to do it. And by the way, you've got 3 hours for everybody, our researchers, our members of the legislature, to review what is going to be a stack of amendments, to have not just a fulsome understanding, but also to make recommendations on which ones are the good amendments, which ones are the bad amendments, which ones will work. Is this the right legal fix? Is this actually the right amendment? Does this accomplish what it needs to accomplish? 3 hours. And then Speaker gets so much better. Then they start the debate from 3:30 to 11 p.m. That's going to be a long day for you, but that's okay. However, after 1 hour, Speaker, at 4:30, those amendments that have not yet been moved or discussed, not yet been fulsomely debated in the 1 hour of debate allowed, 1 hour from 3:30 to 4:30, these amendments which have not yet been moved shall be deemed to be moved, and that the chair of the committee shall interrupt the proceedings and shall, without further debate or amendment, put every question necessary. So basically, then they all go to a vote. So you talk about as many of them as you can in a stack of probably it'll be an inch and a half of straight amendments. After 1 hour of debate, the chair interrupts and says, okay, never mind, we're going to consider them all to have been moved and now we're voting. And I've been in a committee when they've played this game, and it's turn the page and you read the name of the amendment, you vote, the government votes every one of them down except for the 2 or 3 that they put in. Nobody needs to even know what they said because they don't care because decision's been made. And if they want to argue that, 3 hours of consideration, come on. And then it gets reported no later to the House, or no later than Wednesday, March 7th, which is the next day. And it says that if the committee even fails to report the bill, that it'll be deemed to be reported. So it doesn't even matter what the committee says. It'll be deemed to be passed. It comes in for third reading. And basically, it says, notwithstanding Standing Order 81C, the bill may be called more than once on the same sessional day. The vote, third reading, all of that happens, done on the 7th. Today's the 5th. Like, this is disgusting. I could read from the standing order. You know what I'm going to? I never have before. So they're saying, notwithstanding what it says in the standing orders, no government bill shall be called during orders of the day on both a morning and afternoon meeting of the House on the same sessional day without unanimous consent. And they're saying, who cares? We're the majority. We're the government. We don't need your unanimous consent. We wrote it on this time allocation motion. This is so gross. Like, it's awful. It's so awful. Anyway, I took up way more time than I wanted to explaining the process to the government, and none of them they don't care. It's not relevant. What will be shall be, right, Speaker? So here we are debating Bill 175, and it has been my privilege to work with all of the stakeholders on this file. Alongside my critic from Essex, we have both spent time in committee and at community forums listening to community members, special interest groups, working alongside our police forces to have an understanding of all that is in this bill. And there's a lot in this bill, Speaker. I'd like to first say that, the NDP supports the recommendations of Justice Tulloch. These that the changes be enacted. I met Justice Tulloch in Oshawa at one of the consultations. I respect and appreciate personally the work that he's done, but I know that we as a party also have appreciated those community opportunities. We can't get on side with privatization in this bill, but I'll leave that for a moment. As my colleague from Essex reminded the members of this House, that with our then Deputy Leader Jagmeet Singh, we took a strong stand against arbitrary carding, and we maintain that we, when the Minister and Premier were keeping it secret and delaying action, we were calling for SIU reports to be made public. We called for the Andrew Loku report to be made public. We have been working. We've been working with all of our stakeholders on this file, and I really wish that the government had done a better job of that. As I heard in committee, so much work to be done. So I'd better dig right into this. When it comes to the community involvement, I want to thank the folks across the province. We have heard in community consultations. The one I was at was probably indicative of those that were held across the province. We had family members and community members, from civil liberties organizations, from families who have concerns and terrible stories really about their interactions with police in their communities or in the province. We heard from local police officers who want much the same thing as some of our other groups. We need to restore faith in policing. We really do. We appreciate the work that they do. We heard that from community groups as well, but they also have very definite ideas about how we can restore faith and how we can move forward to make policing better in the province. We applaud and appreciate the advocacy that has been done. Our member from Kitchener-Waterloo was working with a family in her area on missing persons legislation. That's in here. And the creation of the Anishinaabe Police Service. About darn time. What an unbelievable process. So, Speaker, I want to talk a bit about privatization, and my colleague from Essex had brought this up, and we will never be on side with privatization. And I'm going to draw a lot from the presentations at committee. All of the New Democrats have sort of been on the record through the years as being against privatization, that we believe in strong public services, public accountability, public oversight, public involvement, and for the greater public good. So we're always going to be against privatization. And this is no exception. We heard from the Police Association of Ontario. President Bruce Chapman had talked about, not only are the financial risks high, and they gave examples of a UK study where they had privatized much of their police services, and they pointed to that and saying it ended up costing far more. So if you want to have the economic argument, let's actually have it. Maybe you can talk about that in the 1 hour in committee when you address all of those amendments. But it isn't in the spirit of public policing. He said, quote, "We can't trust security guards to perform critical duties that help protect the public and maintain law and order. Ontario's safety should not be for sale." Yeah, I don't think there's anyone in this room who should be able to argue that. Well, okay, but the Liberals aren't paying attention and never have. So,
now they are. Now you woke up.
I would ask the government members to please to come to order. Thank you. The member for Oshawa has the floor.
Thank you, sir. And I clearly touched a nerve. I didn't comment about who was or wasn't here. I just commented that I don't believe that they're paying attention, although I can see that one or two are nodding along. So that's good. That's good. Or nodding off. That's fair. So another thing that I'd like to get on the record, the Justice for Abdirahman Coalition was at committee, and the spokesperson, Ms. Dahabo Ahmed Omer, presented to committee and had some remarkable things to say that I would like to share. She did say that, on balance, the measures proposed in this bill can serve to strengthen accountability and begin to rebuild public trust for law enforcement in this province. When it comes to governing police oversight in Ontario, that these are provisions that we welcome. But she did say other points in this bill will go too far, such as the opening of police services to privatization in our communities. Specifically, she said, and I quote, I think that it's important to note that if it is privatized, the police service and the policing system is no longer driven by the safety and security of our community, but more driven by profit. We worry about that. We worry about the fact that the police and community relationship right now is very strained. She went on to say, quote, "I stand firmly against privatization because I think it divides the community from the police. Any time that you take a service and you take it out of the community, for now, I think the only reason why some of the relationship is not completely destroyed is because we do see the police officers in our community. I think that it's important to keep them there, but also to make sure that they have the tools that they need to do their job properly." Couldn't agree more. We're all saying the same thing. If we have officers doing work in our community, those officers need to fall under oversight and accountability and transparency. And if you're going to privatize it and give it to some, small security company or a big multinational like Garda, we don't have access to oversight. They're not under the protective umbrella. So if something goes wrong, a privacy breach or sexual assault or anything, they're not under the same oversight. And how dare they suggest this? It's terrible. Oh, it's awful. Anyway, so privatization, I'm running out of time. I'm going to keep going. So, Speaker, another issue that was raised was on Section 115. Interesting that Bill 115 is what got me motivated to take on this government as a teacher, in my classroom. And Bill 115 kicked the stuff out of our collective agreement, and here we are again with them using the same section, Section 115, go figure. And it's about accommodation and disability, and it can strip disabled officers of their appointments and move them into a civilian accommodation. Why this matters? Well, it matters for a million reasons, but why this matters? Speaker, I've met a lot of police officers. It's been my esteemed privilege to work with a number of community officers and officers across the province, and I'll tell you, there are a couple things that are probably true for just about every cop in this province, and they'll correct me if I'm wrong. I've never met a cop who would give up being a cop, who, that there's a sense of pride, there's a sense of connection, and there should be. So if they're faced with reporting PTSD or seeking help or diagnosis, if they are struggling with mental health, if there is a provision that would strip them of their appointment and make them not be a cop, I don't know what officer would be able to would make that choice. That if I seek help for my mental health or to seek a diagnosis for PTSD, and that there is a risk, as written in here, that they can be stripped of their appointment and moved into a different collective bargaining unit and essentially be a civilian, maybe at a desk job, okay, that they can't be a cop anymore, well, that seems like a significant deterrent. So here we've all stood in the House and said we support, anyone, like the presumption, the PTSD presumption. That government, we certainly have been fighting, with Sherry DeNovo, well, we weren't fighting with Sherry DeNovo, but alongside Sherry DeNovo, and she has been, at the forefront of this to get our first responders the help that they need and that presumption when it comes to PTSD. And that's great. And the government even was on side, okay? And now here we have tucked in this piece of legislation that if they're diagnosed, that they can lose that appointment. That seems like a major deterrent. Is that coming from the municipalities saying that they want a cost-saving strategy, keep them from even reporting in the first place? Where does this come from? So I'm going to read here from Rob Jamieson, who's the president of the Ontario Provincial Police Association, who gave some of his own personal account, which we all appreciated, in his own journey with post-traumatic stress, and that he wants to encourage all of their members, all of their officers, because as he said, everyone wants police officers to be healthy. Their families do, our communities do, they certainly do. We want our officers to be healthy. But he said, quote, "If you don't have officers who are healthy, who can come forward and feel that they're going to be supported, if they come forward under this legislation, they're going to be out of a job, which is going to affect all kinds of things. Officers are proud to be police officers, men and women, more and more diversity within the ranks as well. We want to reflect the communities. People are proud to do what we do, but this really flies in the spirit of that. I'm very concerned about the impact to communities. We need our officers to be healthy, and we need them to be supported. And he goes on to say, that's why I'm blown away by this. I'm astounded by this. To not support officers who want to come forward is, I have no words, I'm shocked, I truly am. And you know what? I don't think that there's anyone in the province who wants officers to be deterred from seeking the support that they need. So clearly that is problematic. I don't know when you'll have time to discuss those amendments. I guess you won't.
No.
Oh, well. Okay. Another piece, and again, with only 4 minutes. The creation of the Anishinaabe-Aski Police Service, great. We're glad that this is a part of this bill. Would have thought it would be a standalone piece of legislation, but here we are. There were some significant concerns raised by the Chiefs of Ontario. Chief Paul Surratt of Garden River First Nation said, if I could just state it, quote, "Our ultimate goal is full First Nation control of First Nations law and order issues. We believe this is necessary for us to have truly safe and healthy communities. The proposed amendments will not achieve that goal, and we see this as a stepping stone in our long path." Thank you. Their specific concerns, and I'll just quickly get them on the record as I totally run out of time. They're saying that these amendments do the exact opposite. Some of their concerns, Speaker. Oh, Lord. See, if I hardly have time to review the submissions, how are you going to have time to review the amendments? So awful. One of their concerns was around bylaw and the nature of First Nation bylaws are one of the important tools for First Nations to address the unique challenges they face, exercise self-government, manage their communities and lands, and keep their communities safe and well. Government needs to take a look at that. Hopefully it's one of the amendments that you won't have time to discuss and they'll pass. But also, this was interesting when it came to language in the bill, that they were concerned. The proposed amendments state that, quote, First Nation territory means a reserve. And as they explained, that is incorrect and very problematic. Who do you have doing your homework? Anyway, as they said, First Nations territories are far more expansive than their reserves. First Nations have important rights and deep connections with their territories, which extend far beyond the reserves, including, but not limited to hunting and fishing rights. To refer to reserves, the amendments should use a term other than territories. What on earth, Speaker? Anyway, our brains just spun when we heard that, and I thought, Lord, they're writing legislation they haven't even, it's like they hadn't consulted for the 4 years. The other piece is from Julian Faulkner, who is the legal counsel, and Travis Boisonneau, who's the Chief Administrative Officer of Anishinaabe-Aski Nation. I want to read you a quote about the process. So I said it was a 4-year process. One of their quotes was, "Throughout our work, we have acknowledged that there is a clear gap between the values expressed by the Premier and Minister Lalonde and the bureaucracy, and further, the legal advice they receive. This void is intolerable, especially for a ministry that is responsible for the provision of adequate and effective police services, negotiating First Nation police services agreements, the provision of funding, and the drafting of policy and legislation that affect Indigenous lives. These same values expressed by the provincial leaders have to govern the behaviour of the bureaucracy." Again, after 4 years of a very challenging exercise, it's clear that cultural competence remains absent. End quote. Speaker, I'm reading directly from Hansard. I can't read to you from their submission because, as Mr. Julian Faulkner said at that time, we have not done a submission, but one is coming. I don't know if they had time to get their submission in. Too late. Hopefully it has been received. There is no time for it to have been reviewed, so I wanted to get that on the record. In my minute and 24 seconds, there were a few other pieces that came out in recommendations around data collection, because as we heard over and over from our community groups, you cannot inform improvements, you cannot interpret data that you are not collecting. We need to be collecting appropriate data. I hope that the government takes their recommendations. Also, there were concerns around sexual assault allegations, that they are not included as a standalone ground for notification or investigation. Is there time to discuss those amendments? When it comes to missing persons, there were concerns that, and this was from the South Asian Legal Clinic of Ontario. Their concerns are that there need to be consultations with privacy experts when it comes to this missing persons legislation, because they said, unfortunately, our work reveals that abusive partners and families sometimes turn to the police and claim that a person is missing in order to try and find them and bring them back into an abusive household. They gave startling and upsetting examples of using the police and saying that the people they were looking for were unsafe or at risk, and then police would chase down this missing person to shelters. We cannot further endanger people. So again, something to consider. And with my 8 seconds left, I want to also say there was no, I don't even have time. I'm finished. Thank you, Speaker.